Hey, good morning. I'm Chief Master Sergeant in the Air Force, Dave Flossie, and General Chief, welcome to the second ever podcast for the Enlisted Edge. So as you guys might know, our first ever podcast was with the Secretary of the Air Force, and we talked kind of the state of the Air Force and what was going on around the department. And I'm excited to have you both here today as our second guests. So welcome to both of you. And General, if you wouldn't mind, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure, Chief. Thanks for having us. First off, we're excited to be here. And to be the second guest, pretty cool. So
Right
Air Force safety usually doesn't get second billing, so we're pretty excited about that. I am Sean Choquette. I'm the Air Force Chief of Safety, the DAF Chief of Safety, so both for Airmen and Guardians. I've been in the job for a year now. Former soldier, so I spent about 9 years in the Army flying UH-60 Blackhawks and then transitioned to the Air Force and became an Air Force rescue pilot. Jumping around jobs and commanded at 3 or 4 levels now and a lot of deployed time in the Middle East. Really excited to be in this job. It's a real chance to positively affect Airmen and Guardians in the Air Force, so pretty excited. And third time in the Pentagon, so unfortunately I know the ways around the hallways here, and Chief and I were able to find this place this morning, so good start.
Yeah, congratulations. It gets weirder the lower you go into the Pentagon.
It does, absolutely.
So well done. Yeah, happy to have you here, sir. And we'll talk more about your background here in a second, but let's get the Chief to introduce herself real quick as well. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you also for having us here. It's a great honor to be able to get to do this.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to have you here.
Absolutely. So I am currently the SEL for the Safety Center as well as the Occupational Safety Career Field Manager. I've been in the seat for 3 years. I'm at the end of my tenure and ready to move on to something else. But same as General Choquette, just really honored to have the opportunity to impact the safety enterprise in a positive way, and especially with these changes we've got coming.
Yeah, great, Chief. So tell me a little bit about kind of your Air Force story. Like, probably a lot of our force doesn't know that we've got a full-time sort of career path in the safety community. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you into the Air Force maybe, and what brought you to where you're at today?
Absolutely. Very open about my past. I joined the Air Force as a means to escape a childhood that was pretty rough. My parents are drug alcoholics. I was in and out of the foster system. We were on welfare. My grades suffered. I was the weird kid in school with lice and thrift store clothes. So when it came time to graduate, I knew I had very limited options. Scholarships were out. We didn't have money for college. So somebody recommended the Air Force, and I took it. And never in a million years did I think that I'd be a chief or that I'd be in for 26 years. And by far the best decision I made. Came in as personnel. Loved doing that. Loved working with people. Got to a point though where I was stagnant about 12 years in, and took the opportunity to retrain. And safety was one of the jobs that was open and was interesting based on what I was told. I was in Eielson at the time, and the safety office there said, you know, we do a little bit of paperwork, but then the rest of our time we go out and ride the 4-wheelers and patrol the fence and ride our,
Maybe
snow
a bit
machines.
Of a sales pitch there.
Absolutely. They told me all the fun parts of it.
Yeah.
But I jumped at the chance and came in. Here I am now as the career field manager. And a lot of people that I talk to don't know that it's an opportunity to retrain into safety. We get so many applications every year. I've got 38 quotas for this fiscal year, and we've got 250 applications pending. So it's incredibly competitive.
That's great.
But one thing that we're looking at right now is trying to bring in the diversity from career fields. So I met 3 brand new retrainees last week. One was services, one was a maintainer, and one was a Russian linguist. So getting that breadth of experience coming into safety really just helps, especially with connecting to airmen in the field and trying to spread the safety message and having the street credit really when they walk into these shops and being able to connect with airmen that they know what they're dealing with on a daily basis. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's great. Thanks. Great Air Force story, and I'm thankful that it worked out the way it did for you. That's a tough beginning, but not an uncommon story. So I appreciate you sharing with that.
It's really not. Absolutely.
Sharing that with us. Yeah, thanks. We often join for sort of a transactional thing like you did, right? Like, hey, just a means to an end. But so did you go through a transition where this used to be just kind of a job and it became a career or profession. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So a lot of people that I encounter in myself did not know that safety was a career field. And now being in it and learning really the extent of what we do. And yes, it's a little bit about checking the base perimeter, but it's a lot more about keeping airmen safe, keeping airmen safe. Came into it and really just was happy being a technician and learning the job, really focusing on how to be the best I could. I felt like I had an uphill battle coming from personnel. My first safety office, bless them, they had to deal with me not knowing anything about maintenance, really. I didn't know what the air traffic control tower was. I didn't know what age was. I didn't know what a pintle hook was. My first few mishaps. Oh, you can laugh. They made quite a bit of fun of me, which is okay.
You're right. I mean, it's a whole new lexicon and a whole new, not just a new vocabulary, but it's a whole series of technical specialties that requires your competence.
Absolutely. And as a personnelist, I was the best personnelist you would ever deal with in the MPF. You came to me and I would get you the answers you needed. I would show you the AFI references. I would do the best I could, but I knew nothing beyond the edge of my desk. I knew nothing about what each of my customers did in their specialties. And that was probably the biggest challenge for me when I came into safety, was going out and learning what the maintainers do, what services does, what structures does. I mean, all of these jobs that I really had no clue about, I had to learn so that I could help keep them safe in their daily tasks. And it was very challenging, but absolutely rewarding. And what we do now, as far as retraining airmen into the career field, it is a retrain only. We really look for a diverse background in specialties so that we can have airmen in safety that can connect with airmen out in the field. I had 0 street credit. My first maintenance inspection, I showed up in blues and went out on the flight line in the safety truck in my blues, thinking I'm sharp. They're going to love this. I'm professional. No, they scattered like roaches. They wanted absolutely nothing to do with me because I was intimidating and definitely not suited for the environment that I was walking into. Right. So again, steep learning curve, but learning to connect with them and learning now as the career field manager to bring people in that have those diverse backgrounds and can connect more effectively. It's been tremendously helpful.
That's great. Great background. I appreciate you sharing. And it is true. You're kind of describing what I'd like to ask you about, General, which is, the department's really focused on all of our specialties all across the Air Force. I'm focusing on missions over functions as a priority. And that was, I had the opportunity to serve with a rescue group earlier in my career. And I can tell you, no more righteous mission out there, first of all. And being every single person assigned to the organization being centered around this idea of that others may live, right? So can you talk a little bit about your experience there, how that may be an exemplar for the direction we're going, and how that ties into the Air Force Safety Center as well?
Sure, absolutely. And I'm a little bit prejudiced because I did grow up in rescue. I love the community.
Me too.
That others may live. I mean, there's no more altruistic motto or ethos out there. And the people in the community don't just say those words; they really live it. And to get out in the field and actually get to do that, I'll tell you, I miss it. As much as it's fun to do important stuff in this big 5-sided building, I miss the field and the force. But you're right. What we have been doing in the rescue community for years really is pretty representative of GPC, Agile Combat Employment, and Mission-Ready Airmen. All these concepts that we're talking about right now under Reoptimized for GPC are things that we've been getting after in rescue for probably 20 years. Small teams, composite teams with different airmen and different AFSCs all deploying, first of all, training and working together, and then deploying together, going to austere places in disaggregated operations. I mean, what does that sound like, right? That's the types of things.
You are literally describing hub and spoke operations.
That's right. So a lot of great experience doing that there in small teams all around the Middle East. And really gives me a good background to look at these concepts today. And to Chief's point, like, her story is really appropriate because she talks about the safety professional walking down to the flight line and everybody scattering like roaches and saying, oh, here comes the safety person. We're really trying to flip that on its head with this new campaign and concept where we're creating safety experts throughout the Air Force. And I'm reluctant to say safety. We're really talking specifically about risk management and getting that skill set out there. So it's not a safety professional walking onto the flight line saying, hey, let's look at these things. It literally is airmen walking around their flight line or their operations area, their personnel office, you name it, the front gate, and saying, is there a better way to do this? What are the conditions like today? Should we kind of take a look at what we're doing and ask some hard questions? Because they're not necessarily going to have a safety expert or a chief to walk out there and do that for them. So we want to give them that skill set. That's the whole purpose behind this. So it's really back to the future in a lot of ways, right? There's nothing new under the sun. We're reviving some concepts and some ideas and really just trying to infuse them out to the force.
That's great. That's we're going to get more into this campaign here in a minute, and I like this idea of focusing on risk. We understand that the requirement is the requirement, right? And there's a lot of demand on our airmen across the service, and there's almost always demand exceeding our capacity. And that means we've got to find where we're going to take risk. And as demand goes up, our resources have remained relatively flat, which means we have to we have to be really, really good critical thinkers, and we have to figure out how to best take risk that minimizes our exposure to danger and make sure our airmen are ready and able to execute the mission when we need to. So we'll talk more about that. Before we dive into the Integrated Risk and Readiness Campaign specifically, could you kind of just give us an overview of your responsibilities and really the mission of the Air Force Safety Center? I think, again, we've got a lot of cool organizations in the Air Force, and as a kind of a direct reporting unit, it's not very familiar to every airman across the Air Force.
You bet. Thanks for asking. It's a really good question. And coming into this job a year ago, I generically knew what Air Force safety was, but had never really dived into it. And so I'll start with kind of a weird sentence, which is Air Force safety isn't about safety. Air Force safety is about operations. And we in our organization did a strategy session here about 5 or 6 months ago and really oriented ourselves around that. And that this is operations. This is A3 business. This is commander business. This is not just safety officer business. And we've oriented our entire strategy around that. As our job is to improve mission readiness, to create combat ready systems and airmen, and help commanders get after their business, which is being ready to go to war. It's all about combat operations. So that's what we do. But we look at it through the lens of, hey, where are the risks out there? Where are the things that we're doing that maybe we could do better, smarter, safer to preserve that combat power, to preserve our airmen, and to preserve our equipment? Fiscal year 23, we lost 49 airmen and guardians in the Air Force, down to 42, I think, last year. That's not just a loss of a human being, an important teammate. That's a loss of combat power, like the things that are happening in our Air Force to be ready to go to war. We're here to help preserve those folks, prevent those accidents from happening. So where are we focused? We're really focused on integrating risk management and safety in all operations every day and everything that we do. We're really focused on, again, what we talked about before, great power competition, Agile combat employment, and how do we look at integrating into those operations, not just at home station, but out on the edge. When we start sending small teams of airmen and guardians out places to do things, they're going to have to make decisions and take risks. And combat really equals risk, right? Like That's I said, right. 49 airmen in 23. Let's just baseline ourselves with this is risky stuff. If you're going to take action, you're going to take risks. And so we have to give people the skill set to react to that. The other thing that we do, and it's happening all through the DAF and the DOD, is a focus on data. We have a lot of data. In the safety business, we've been collecting it for 40 years. We know what mishaps have happened. We know what things we've done incorrectly. But how can we take that data fabric, look at it, integrate it, cultivate it, and find some lessons there that can give us some predictive things on where the next accident is going to happen? Usually a commander and a chief come into their command positions and they look at the crowd out in the auditorium on day 1 or 2 or 20 and say, okay, take a look. Where's the next accident going to happen? Where's the mishap going to happen? And what we're doing is actually looking at the data, and we're going to have some real analytical rigor through some AI algorithms to say, this is where we think it's going to happen. This is where we kind of know it's going to happen. And here's some things, commander and chief, that you can do to maybe prevent that. So some real crunch work with regards to numbers to help us out. And then we have a couple other interesting areas that we're working that's a part of the safety center that I really wasn't aware of, which is space safety, both launch and on orbit. And then nuclear surety. We have the nuclear surety portfolio for the DAF for our two legs of the triad. So it's pretty exciting, and it's a lot of work, but Chief and I love it.
That's great. I can tell you, I spent about 20 years in the nuclear surety business, and we're very aware of the Air Force Safety Center and what you bring. And for us, and I think for the larger Air Force, it certainly is not just, this isn't safety inspection protocols and being compliant. It's always been a conversation, and we didn't scatter when safety showed up. In fact, please come on in, because nobody wants to get that mission wrong. And I think that's the idea we're going to have as a department going forward, is all good ideas are welcome here, because we're being asked to do some incredibly hard things, and we're moving it. My hands are going the other way, but we're moving it to the left.
Yeah.
We can no longer wait until we're downrange to get qualified and operationally competent to execute, especially in this disaggregated fashion that you were talking about.
You
so
bet.
we're expecting to make those risk decisions in garrison, and it will become an everyday thing. But that's an increased level of risk to what we do today. So we've got to be really good at that decision making. So I'll turn to you, Chief. In the flying community that the general grew up in, and that you've now been exposed to for a while, there's a really good kind of an ORM process, right? A risk management process that goes into crews and their operational capability to go out on a mission any given day. And there's a pretty healthy culture of kind of stand-up briefs and pre-briefs and step briefs and a debrief culture that helps us stay risk informed and make really good decisions. That doesn't exist across the entire service, though. So can you talk a little bit about how we can expand that sort of mindset across the service, independent of if you're on direct flying operations or in support of in some fashion?
Absolutely. So I really like to think of, especially this new initiative with integrating risk and readiness, of creating a risk management core competency across all AFSCs. Really, it's so easy to assume, especially coming from personnel. I was skeptical of safety even then, of like, we joke about paper cuts, and that was our biggest risk. Right. First of all, paper cuts are no joke. Second of all, there's a heck of a lot more to be concerned about with risk management.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, in disaggregated operations, and this idea of ACE operations, there's no such thing as a personnelist, and that's right. This transformation we're making is you're an airman first, and every airman should be mission ready, and that means that you've got to have some competencies, and we all need those competencies independent of your specialty. So go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So while trying to really build on the skills and the tools necessary to provide all airmen and guardians to better make risk-informed decisions, I think that the impact will be massively positive. And people just kind of, I hear it a lot, especially when I would teach as a 1SO at the wing level. Risk management, I don't need to know that, or what is that? Or the assumption is, okay, so before I go out this weekend, you want me to sit down and draw out the 5-step process with my friends. And that's not realistic. And no, that's not what we're expecting. You do risk management when you are backing out of your driveway in the morning. You check to make sure that the bike's not behind you, or the dog's not running around, or whatever it might be, before you actually back up. And as simple as that seems, it's not always that easy to do or to be mindful of. General Choquette says this all the time. Every job, every task that we have in the Air Force, in the Space Force, we have an AFI, a DAFI, an AFMAN, a TO telling us how to do that job step by step safely. And somewhere there's a disconnect where we get complacent or we skip steps, and then that's where the risk comes in. So if we just try to implement more of that risk mindset of, okay, hey, I'm going to back out of my driveway. I'm going to look behind me before I do so. With everything that we do, I think that we'll be better for it, and hopefully see a decline in the fatalities that we've seen the last couple of years.
Right. No, that's great. That's a great perspective. Thank you. So I think it's a good transition point to talk specifically about this campaign, sir. So the Integrated Risk and Readiness campaign kicked off with a message from the chief. Was it early October, the 1st of October?
You bet.
If you wouldn't mind talking about the genesis of that, where that came about, and kind of the goal of this this renewed focus on it.
Sure.
And then I'd like to tease out too a little bit of this idea about everyday risk. I think I'm fairly confident in my travels around the Air Force in my tenure here that we are asking a lot of our airmen, and sometimes again that those decisions do have to be made. We're unable to be a rotely compliant Air Force, and standards matter. Discipline matters, even more so when we're putting demands on your time that may exceed your capacity. So if you can talk about how we need to work through that as a force and in the campaign itself,
Sure.
I'd appreciate it.
And I'll start with, when we first pitched this to General Alvin, we really were pushing on an open door. Like, intuitively, he knew right out the gate, yes, this is the right thing to do. And we started right with the numbers that we talked about earlier.
Yes, sir.
Right, in fiscal year 23, we lost 49 airmen and guardians, and we had 30 plus Class A mishaps in our Air Force. And I don't say that to say they're going up or down, but just as a baseline, what we do is dangerous. We are going to lose equipment. We are going to lose people.
It's a lethal business.
It's a lethal business. Combat requires taking risks, is what we do for a living. So on top of that, start talking about the changes in our Air Force and how those kind of potentially multiply those risks. So the fact that we're doing agile combat employment, disaggregated operations, the fact that we're going to have mission-ready airmen who are training on skill sets outside of their primary. And then we're going to ask them to go out in small teams in areas that they haven't been before, take a look at what's going on, do these operations, be able to communicate with our headquarters or not. And then we're changing some of the major structures in the Air Force itself, the very fabric of how we're organized as a part of this reoptimized for GPC. All those things create an Air Force where our airmen have the potential to kind of take their eye off the ball on a daily basis because they're thinking about all these changes while they're doing their daily job. So how do we adjust for that? And the fact that the leadership and authorities is going to be pushed down. And the answer is risk management. And that's the pitch that we made to the chief, is that skill set that if we can build it into an airman's DNA, that at whatever level, you say you have a small team led by a young officer or a staff or a tech sergeant, that's, you name the environment, out in the woods, out in the jungle, on a beach, that as they're going through operations, can somebody in the team, whether it's the senior person or not, can say, stop, knock it off for a minute, right? And in the aviation community, we say knock it off. We all level the airplanes, we change altitudes, and we stop talking and we figure out what's going on. The same thing applies everywhere. Could apply in an office. Let's take a knee. Let's go through some sort of risk management process, assess our environment, our operations, and how we're doing things, and maybe adjust fire a little bit. What they've just done is just reduce the risk and perhaps even made themselves more efficient at what they're getting after and better at getting the mission done. So we want to make that a ubiquitous skill set throughout the Air Force. That was the pitch that we made to the chief, and he said, yes, go for it. And we named it an Integrating Risk and Readiness Campaign for a very important reason. It's a campaign. It's a temporally staged set of steps that we're going to go through. The first part was the stand-up day, not reactionary to any mishap, but a proactive way for the chief to get the message out there and to get some teams talking about how these concepts apply in their areas as we potentially walk into combat operations. And then the second stage is really some additional things that we're doing to infuse it into OIs, like the chief talked about, to infuse it into training. They're going to get it at every level of professional and force development, to get it into our exercises so that we're actually doing it and assessing it, and then getting that muscle memory. Chief hit the nail on the head. Like, every day we do this, but if we can train to it and assess to it, it'll just become a part of our DNA and how we operate and integrate into what we do. And that's really what we're trying to get to.
No, that's perfect. The idea of getting this built in, I think our transition from Air Education Training Command to Airman Development Command will be a big part of that too.
You bet.
You'll be able to more consistently, I think, apply safety principles and really risk. Critical thinking is what this boils down to for me, right? Good critical thinking skills and risk management skills throughout the life cycle of an airman's training and education, which we'll need because a couple safety professionals at the wing level, we're not going to be putting them into the spokes, right? Maybe in training environments, and as we exercise and go through our AFOR-Gen cycle for the parts of the Air Force that run through the AFOR-Gen cycle, we'll be able to assess and tune it up. But we really need those skills all the way out to those spokes. I recently got to take a group of chiefs out through the Indo-PACOM theater, and we lived ACE for about a week, and I can tell you that's a group of, 25 years on average or more of experience in the Air Force. And even putting those chiefs into a stressful situation that they weren't completely prepared for, even though they're qualified, I would argue. Our first iteration of a contested environment, one group, there were 30 chiefs in the group, and through the exercise scenario, we lost 22 of them in our very first go. Now, we learned from that, and we took a knee. We called knock it off. We assessed the situation, and it turns out it's not a good idea to go take cover right next to like a 20,000 gallon fuel tank, for example. But it sounds obvious and almost ridiculous. But frankly, in a contested environment and in a situation where you're under a lot of stress and you're being asked to do several things, which we were establishing a spoke operation, right? So we're building out a camp. We're trying to establish an airfield. We know we had inbound aircraft on a timeline, so we had a deadline. And we also understood the environment was not secure. So we're trying to secure our own environment and establish communications and be sure we're applying the principles of mission command and all these things. And then you get an inbound. And there's no bunkers. This is not an improved airfield, right? And so if you've not thought through all of that in advance and you're not making good risk decisions, you very easily can end up in a lethal situation. So I think those principles are what we're going to be talking about through this risk and readiness.
One interesting paradigm in that scenario you just brought up too, that we're really trying to infuse into this, and the concept of the knock it off, right, is it's not going to be a group of chiefs out there. It's going to be a group of multiple ranks. And perhaps the youngest airman is the one that looks over at the chief by the fuel dump and says, that's not a good idea. And we want to create a culture where that youngest airman steps up and says, hey, that's a bad idea, chief. Let's go over here. It's prevalent in our flying community because we do this crew resource management thing, this training that teaches us, hey, in my H60 community, that the A1C gunner sitting in the seat behind me probably is seeing a lot more than I'm seeing up in the cockpit and has the gumption to step up, speak up and say, hey, sir, that's a dumb idea. Break left. We want to have that in every career field across the Air Force, where not only do the young airmen feel empowered to say something, but obligated to say something. And then what they do, everybody reacts positively and says, that's right. Let's change course.
That's it. That's what this campaign, I think, is all about at the end of the day. And this focus on standards and discipline, like you just mentioned, a young airman having enough discipline to say this is putting us at unnecessary risk, and I need to say something to my superiors. It makes us a more lethal force at the end of the day. It does make us more operationally ready, and that, to your point, is why we have the safety center and why we've got this campaign moving on, right? So, Chief, we'll turn over to you. You've been quiet here for a minute. We've been blabbing away. So how's this going? How's the risk and readiness campaign, and how's the implementation going, and what feedback are you getting from the field, or anything you'd like to share so we can continue a healthy implementation of the program?
Sure. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback. Initially, there was some questions, and I think being here is a great opportunity to help provide some clarification.
For sure.
Because it is so new and different. And like you made the point earlier, operations, this is standard. This is very normal for you to talk about ORM before and after and throughout every mission. And for the rest of us, it's a little bit different. So this has been really great to get the information out. Also, I think in empowering the MAGCOMs, not field comms yet, but the MAGCOMs and the wings to do it in the way that works for them has been incredibly helpful as well. We acknowledge fully that no two are alike, that they are all dealing with their own risks, their own missions. The way they operate is different. And so really getting the feedback from them of, hey, this is what worked for us, and this is how we're communicating. This is the most that I've ever seen people talk about safety, and that warms my little CFM heart, really. We talk about how do you make safety attractive? How do you get us a seat at the table? And this is the first time that I've seen where we're not really having to do that. It's being done throughout the force in a very positive way, and our hope ultimately is that it helps keep airmen safe. That's the bottom line, and I'm really hopeful that that's what we see.
Yeah, for sure. I'm kind of focused on the PRC right now, as you both are, right? And that's what this matters to me and the chief and the secretary is we need every airman available. We don't have spare airmen. Every single airman is critical to the mission. So in order for us to be lethal and capable, we have got to eliminate unforced errors. So I think that there's a welcoming of this idea. You know, in the maintenance community that I grew up in, we absolutely didn't start a day without a pre-task safety briefing. We went over and we built a shared understanding of anybody that was coming into that environment. And if you came into the operating environment and you weren't there for that briefing, you didn't come in. We stopped. We brought you up to speed on what was going on, the status of the operation. There's a balance there, right? So how do you do that in a environment that is time sensitive, that there's a mission aspect where your risk measures change based off of the requirement of the mission, right? So can you talk a little bit how you're working that through the forces, balancing risk to mission, risk to force? Those things can be in conflict, right?
Absolutely. I think General Choquette alluded to this earlier, is the preparation, giving the tools and teaching the competencies and really just weaving it into everything that we do so that it is much more natural. And we're talking about, Airmen Development Command, soon to be, is on board with helping us do some of that, getting these risk management lessons into basic training, all tech schools, all levels of PME on the enlisted and officer side, to where it really does become second nature.
Right.
If we can do that at the very basic level, then when we do come to the time of conflict or increased mission ops or whatever the situation is, it won't be something that has to be deliberately thought, okay, let's sit down and do this.
Right. You don't have to break out a separate checklist.
Right.
It's part of your daily operations.
Right. And it won't be so foreign. Right now it is. I think we're going through a little bit of growing pains because this is new, but hopefully, and we may not see this through to fruition, but in the next few years, hopefully it will be something that's a lot more organic, and that, when we do come to those difficult times, we are seeing people implement risk management correctly.
Oh, that's great. I'm picturing all these changes that we're making with 400 level certification events. We have combat support training ranges. And I think that's where, because it's not new everywhere. We talked about crew resource management. We talked about the debrief culture.
Very true.
And probably in ops and maintenance, that exists to some degree, depending on the specialty, but we're gonna up our operational IQ there, and then we're bringing it into the rest of the force that doesn't have that, and a lot of our support forces do, but not all. So I think we're at the right time in the Air Force's transition to bring this in across the force. So it's good. So all right, General, we've got a hot topic.
Okay.
So there's this thing about non-disclosure agreements.
You bet.
And I don't know, are we just being mean and we don't want people to talk to their friends, or which I don't assess is the real reason we're doing this.
Not.
So if you wouldn't mind, please, a little
Sure.
clarification on this initiative that probably was started in your organization.
Yeah, Chief. I've had a couple opportunities to talk about it now, so thanks for the chance again. This maintenance safety privilege initiative is actually really exciting. I mean, it is a great thing for the Air Force. It is a great thing for our airmen, and we're not doing anything that we haven't done for decades now. And why are we doing this? Because we trust our maintenance professionals on the flight line to share the safety privilege with them that, quite frankly, we probably should have done for a long time.
That's right.
We've seen an increase in mishaps. Chief and I were talking this morning. Fully almost 37% of our Class A through E mishaps are AGOs, aviation-related ground operations mishaps. That's a big number, and 80% of those involve maintenance professionals. So why is it that we have a wing safety brief, monthly, quarterly, whatever it is, and a bunch of aviators go into the auditorium? Is it maintenance pouring in right behind them to get all those lessons learned, rich lessons from our mishap prevention program that they can't because they're not under safety privilege? So you said the NDAA or the NDA. Why are we doing that? It really is just a mechanism for our airmen to sign and acknowledge what safety privilege is, because it's protected information. It protects our airmen, and it protects the program so that they are not at risk of any disciplinary action or public release when they give us a fulsome accounting of what happened during a mishap, so that we get to the core of what happened quickly and get the lessons from that. And we preserve combat power. So we're having them do the same thing that aviators have done for decades. We're trusting them with the information, and we hope the end goal is the number of mishaps drops, because our airmen are better educated on what's going on there and learning the lessons and spreading the word and talking about it. You combine that with this risk management initiative, risk and readiness, it's a powerful tool set. So we're pretty excited about it. It's kind of been twisted a little bit and turned. At the end of the day, this is a great thing for our Air Force, our mission, and our airmen.
That's a perfect explanation. I'm only smiling because it's not that twisted.
That's right.
The vast majority of our airmen, our professional airmen out there across the force, know why we sign non-disclosure agreements. And it was a head scratcher earlier in my career to talk to somebody that had some safety privilege information. And, they would occasionally give you enough to start to grab the why. And I think in today's Air Force, we have the smartest airmen that have ever served their nation. It's an all-volunteer force. We trust them around highly, highly classified, very, very dangerous, very, very expensive, and very lethal equipment every single day. So to not take this little administrative step to make sure they've got access to the safety information that makes them more lethal and capable, no brainer.
You bet.
So I'm thankful we're doing it. I'm getting a sense that we're running low on time, which is a bummer because this conversation is just getting going. So I'll turn to you, Chief, first. Maybe some closing comments, but also talk a little bit about, say you're a master sergeant out there, and whether you're right in the middle of this because you do sort of flying operations on a regular basis, or if you're in a back shop, or if you're in an administrative support capacity in an organization somewhere out there in the Air Force, and they want to learn more about this, and maybe they just, for whatever reason, they weren't quite up to speed on what we're doing with risk and readiness across the Air Force. Where can they get access to that information? Who should they talk to, either at the local level or through your organization, so they can ensure their airmen that what I say senior NCOs and senior officers exist for is we're there to set conditions for our airmen to be successful, right?
Absolutely.
So how can we help them make sure their airmen have the right conditions to be successful?
Absolutely. First and foremost, your wing safety shop, or if you're at a Space Force base, the Delta, reach out to those people. They're there to help you. They're there to help advise, not just commanders, but airmen at every level. That's the first step. At the Safety Center, our risk manager is Mr. Matt Shover, and he's recently hired into the seat and really just taken the bull by the horns, especially with all of these changes. And he's there to help as well. Anywhere in between, your MAGCOM, FieldCom can help out too. I would just recommend ask the questions. If you see something that doesn't look right, doesn't seem right, or you're not sure about it, and you can be the best at your job, but when these different situations arise and you're not familiar with it and you don't ask the question, that's where trouble happens. So I just say, ask the question, ask for help. Don't be afraid to reach out. And I'm really just excited about all of these things, especially the NDA push. I see it as this is paving the two-way street. For my safety career, I've asked maintainers to share information about hazards, share information about mishaps, so that I can find the root cause and ultimately keep people safe and keep it from happening again. But there hasn't been the return, and now it's there. I can now share information with them,
right.
And I really think that there's a lot of goodness in that.
That's great. Thanks for joining us today, Chief.
Absolutely, thank you.
Sir, over to you for some closing comments and any final thoughts on. It can be any related topic to your current duties or just as a senior leader here in the United States Air Force.
You bet. I'll start again with thanks for having us. It's exciting for us to get to share the message and to talk to people. And you have a big audience, an opportunity to affect folks. And so we're excited to work with you. It's at a level even above Air Force safety. It's a really exciting time to be in the Air Force. Now, granted, I've probably been saying that for 31 years because it's always exciting.
That's true.
But
There's
is
always something going on.
The secretary and the chief are empowering our airmen to go out and do things, giving them agency, giving them authorities, giving them capabilities. From the air component commander on down. And as you alluded to, as we get into these disaggregated great power competition type operations, with those authorities, we're going to take risk. We don't have enough airmen to do everything, and we're going to make some hard decisions on what we do and how we do it. And our young airmen are a part of that fabric. They're literally going to get to make those decisions. So as Air Force safety professionals, we're just really happy to be able to now inject this risk management piece into it, to give them the skill sets and reps to learn it, to your point, to make it a part of their intrinsic operations and their DNA, and create some tool sets to put out there to help them out. And we owe them that. And the safety enterprises is working on some things. This isn't just talk. This is actually some things to get after some stuff. So we're really excited about it. We're gonna keep down the path of the campaign. We've got a chief of staff of the Air Force and a chief master sergeant of the Air Force that are excited about it.
Yes,
so
sir.
it's a great time to be out there doing the job.
That's a great wrap up. This is about our mission, right? This is being mission ready includes understanding risk and making incredibly smart decisions. We're asking our airmen to do dangerous things every single day, and we are really focused on training the way we fight, which means we'll be more dangerous in garrison as we move forward. So I appreciate your efforts and the efforts of the Air Force Safety Center as we work together to make sure we've got mission ready airmen that can deter and, if necessary, defeat any adversary we've got out there. So that's it. I think we'll call it a wrap on our second ever podcast of the Enlisted Edge. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you, sir.
Great time.
All right. Have a great day.